So, first of all, I'm not a liar. Well, I'm in a lawyer. No, I'm in a liar. You should never take my word for anything. You should always do your own research. I provided references to aid you in your research, but I don't know everything, and I'm open to any ideas. There's 4 types of people in the world. There's the people who try to wake up the slaves. There's the slave masters. There's the people who have no idea they're slaves, and there's the people who like being slaves. Which one are you? Do you really know for sure? And if you can see through the illusion, then you are part of the solution. I think most of the people here can see through the illusion. If the people do not know their basic rights and freedoms, how can they possibly know when or if their rights and freedoms are being infringed? Never forget, the men who started this country were marijuana-growing, whiskey-drinking, tax-evading rebels who left their beds at night to shoot at the cops. That's true. That's exactly what they did. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And so, and these are the writings of the Founding Fathers, okay? Man will ultimately be ruled by God or by tyrants. And that's one or the other, and there's nothing in between. It's either by God or by tyrants. It is when people forget God that tyrants forge their chains. And those people who will not be governed by God will be ruled by tyrants. There's and I have the entire transcript from the Norman Dodd testimony. There's actually a YouTube video with Norman Dodd. I don't know how many people remember Norman Dodd. He was involved with a House Committee on Un-American Activities back in the 50s. And he went and interviewed the Ford Foundation and these different tax-exempt foundations to find out, you know, they were engaged in subversive activities. And they flat out told him, and this is a quote right here, Mr. Dodd, all of us who have a hand in making the policies here have had experience operating under directives, the substance of which is that we are using our grant-making power so as to alter life in the United States that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Well, Soviet Union's gone, but China's still here. And, you know, if you think about it, I mean, we've been under a military dictatorship for, you know, decades. You don't think that, I mean, do you think anything would change if China came here, invaded? Nothing would change, really. I mean, other than, you know, the county sheriff might all of a sudden start, I mean, rounding up people like us. But they wouldn't flat out, they wouldn't go door to door looking for you. They just, like if you get stopped on the highway, you get arrested, and, you know, then it kind of go from there. Maybe sent to a re-education camp or who knows what. And, you know, they have counties in China. I don't know if you know that, but they have, there's a YouTube channel called, they're in New York. Oh, man, I can't remember the name. But I watch their videos all the time, and they talk about, you know, the different counties in China. And they've been talking about this Three Gorges Dam that's getting ready to break. Anyways, the point being is that the military dictatorship, that's what communism is a military dictatorship. And under martial law, there's no law, okay? They can do anything they want, and that's you're seeing, a lot of us have seen that. Now we can, with Trump is trying to bring back the rule of law, and so that's why we're having some successes. But I don't quite frankly, if Trump was out of office, again, it would come down to you'd have to watch Lindsey Graham's video, because ultimately that's what he says, okay? And you'd have to watch the rest of that video, but that's what he says, is that that the elite cannot do anything as long as he is in office. But once he's out of office, they're going to be back to business as usual. And as you look around at what's going on right now, to a large degree, they're back to business as usual anyway. So, you know, we have to understand that. I'm not saying that we should go out and get our guns and all the rest of it. I mean, we should certainly be armed. And that's why I was going to show the Jonathan Cahn video, because he actually says that that if you follow God's law, even in spite of everybody else, then there'll be all sorts of divine intervention that'll happen on your behalf. And I believe that's true. I think that a lot of the stuff that's going on in China, they're getting all this huge rainstorms, this massive flooding. They got this Three Gorges Dam that's about to break because of the fact that they just get never-ending rainstorms. And maybe that's God, divine intervention, slapping the Chinese for what they're doing. And there's, again, if you look at my future maps and stuff like that back there, you know, maybe some of that's going to start those earth changes. I think that there's a lady by the name of Penny Kelly that's on JSNIP4's YouTube channel. She's a remote viewer, and she has made some. First of all, she made a bunch of predictions based on remote viewing last November, and I would have never guessed that it would come true, but it is right now. She talked about, she says, in April, let me read what she said in April. This was last November, and I would have never guessed that how that would have happened. Says, waves of change. Boy, I'll say waves of change in April. She said bond markets crash, Euro crashes, European banks collapse, floods, pension funds collapse. Well, I think all of that happened, except that the European bank, Jim Willey said that there was banks that failed in England or in Europe, but the European Central Bank covered it up, bailed them out. So the point is that she has made a bunch of predictions about, she said there's going to be this Trump's going to win election, but there's going to be major, she calls it fracture. And she said that she doesn't know what that means. That's what she got when she remote viewed. And she said there's going to be fractures on the West Coast. Well, I think that, I mean, if you look at these future maps, there's lots of fractures. Yes?
What is remote viewing?
Remote viewing is a program that was actually started by the U.S. Army in the 60s or 70s, where they would put you in a cubicle. They say that everybody's psychic, and that there's a giant library of everything that's ever done, especially in the past. The future gets murky because of human free will. But they can remote view in the near-term future. They can remote view in the past, and they can. That's how we knew what the Russians were doing or the Soviets were doing during the Cold War. Is they got it down to about 80% accuracy. There's YouTube channels that are based on remote viewing, and they're quite interesting. Some of the stuff that they predict, and then you see it happen. And it's basically, it's using, they say that everything that is done is recorded on the fabric of space-time, and that actually they say that there's no past, there's no present, there's no future, it's one eternal now. And so I guess that's how they do some of the future, near-term future remote viewing. Anyways, the guy that did those maps didn't use remote viewing. He had a health crisis. And after that health crisis in the 70s, his name is Gordon Michael Scallion. What happened was he started getting these visions, and the visions were like really obnoxious. I mean, he'd be driving down the road and he'd get this vision, and he would be trying to go to sleep, and the vision had come. And it got to the point that he couldn't get any sleep or anything, and his wife says, well, why don't you write it down? And so he wrote it down. And at least once he wrote it down, that the vision had quit coming. And so he got in the habit of writing them down all the time, just so he could get some sleep and have some peace of mind. And then he started noticing that they started happening. And so these future maps are based on visions that he would get. And so, anyways, but remote viewers are getting the same kind of stuff. And so, at any rate, that's what remote viewing is they put you in a cubicle and they give you a piece of paper with some random number on it, like 5G27 Romeo Sierra 22 or something. And you don't have any idea what that is, but they have it written down as a target. And the target could be, you know, maybe coordinates somewhere on the face of the planet. Anyways, you're supposed to write down your impressions of what you get. Once you learn how to read that stuff, like for example, like when Penny Kelly does it, she said that you cannot have any preconceived ideas. You have to just, whatever comes to you, write it down. And it will come. Whatever it is comes to you, just write it down. And that's why she didn't know what fracture means. Well, I think it's those kinds of fractures, but it could be political fracture, it could be a lot of things. You know, but she just got the word fracture is what came to her. Anyways, so my point is right now is that we have been prepared for the last 50 years to be merged with the communists, okay? And we've basically been under a military dictatorship, and Reagan tried to put a stop to it and probably slowed it down somewhat. I think it started really with Kennedy's assassination. Kennedy tried to put a stop to it, and they killed him. I've just written a book, actually. I wrote it with, and there's a picture of my book back there. The book is published, but we haven't actually, they're printing them, and I haven't received any yet. Otherwise, I was hoping to have some here. But I've written a book, and it's entitled Trump, a True American Patriot or Not? And you'd have to read the book to see what, you know, exactly I say about it. But, you know, at the very, I'll read you the back. And actually, this part is not what, I didn't write this part. The people that published the book wrote this little diatribe here. Thank you. Says, for too long, a small group in our nation's capital have reaped the rewards of government at the cost of its citizens. This is actually a quote from Trump's inaugural speech. It says, for too long, a small group in our nation's capital have reaped the rewards of government at the cost of its citizens. Washington flourished, but the insiders refused to share in its wealth. Politicians prospered, but allowed our jobs to leave and our factories to close. Not anymore. Now, this part here is written by the publishers of my book. It says, not anymore. In Trump, a true American patriot or not, Glenn Fern and Mike Blackwell reveal the depths of corruption, deceit, and manipulation infesting our political system for hundreds of years, regardless of political affiliation. Read the hard evidence that exposes how our elected officials sold Americans into slavery. Understand the Founding Fathers' true intent when they formed our Republican form of government. Discover the influence of the Satanic Roman cult on our politicians and political system. Does Trump want to transfer power back to we the people? In Trump, you will see the great battle that is upon us. So, anyways, that's my book. And it's about 350 pages, and hopefully I'll have it in about a month. But, and then Mike Blackwell, I put him on the book. I wrote the book, quite frankly. But Mike Blackwell actually asked me to write the book. He published it, and he financed the publishing, which it cost him quite a bit of money. So I wanted to make sure that he was able to, you know, if something happened to me, that he would be able to make sure and pursue, you know, circulating the book and everything. So I put his name on it, just to make sure that he could make sure and recover his costs, because he spent a lot of money publishing the book. But he actually asked me, he said, he said he thought that I had at least a couple books in my head here, so who knows. At any rate, so that's my book, and then his book, he's actually a Vietnam veteran, and he talks about, he volunteered for Vietnam, you know. Matter of fact, he joined the army, volunteered, and they sent him to Germany, and he said, I don't want to go to Germany, I want to go to Vietnam. and he went and twisted their arm and told them to send him to Vietnam, and he was like in the special forces, and you ought to read his book, it's pretty interesting. Anyways, and it's called Treason by Fraud, Lies, and Deception. And his book isn't near as big as mine, but it kind of warms you up, gets you ready for my book, kind of. Anyways, so what the important thing to understand here is that we need to understand, you have to know your enemy. Isn't that with the art of war, whatever that, Sun Tzu, there we go. The art of war, you got to know the enemy. And so that's part of these books, part of what we're talking about now. But at the end, but we are at war. Okay, we have to understand that as we are at war. It's not something that might happen. It is happening. It's political war right now, and Trump is doing his part certainly. At the beginning of my book, I say, why would a man who's a self-made billionaire expose himself and his family to the ridicule, slander, and potential assassination of being President of the United States? And then you look at his Trump a penthouse suite in the Trump Tower and his Mar-a-Lago estate, and then you look at his White House quarters. I mean, the White House is probably pretty nice for somebody like me or you, but for Trump, I think it's a bit of a dump. Yeah. Anyways, so the point is that you got to read the book and come to your own conclusions. But it goes through and talks about the law. It talks about what's going on, about how that summary I think covers it pretty well. Anyways. So these are the Communist Manifesto, or the 10 points. Yeah, you can turn that off. Thank you. This is the 10 points of the Communist Manifesto. Number 1 is abolition of private property and the application of all rents to land for public purposes. Well, you think about it. Matter of fact, Jonathan Kahn points it out in his video that God is the one that created private property, because which commandment is it that says thou shalt not steal? Well, that suggests that you have something to steal, right? That's private property. You're not supposed to be taking something that doesn't belong to you. But that's what these communists do. They steal. They're thieves. They're satanic. That's what it is Satanism. A heavy, progressive, and graduated income tax. All of this is in place, okay? For people that don't know the law, they don't have private property. They pay a yearly rent in the form of property taxes every year. They pay income tax. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. Well, Trump has been changing that somewhat, but certainly under the communists, or I meant the Democrats, no, I meant the communists, that there would be, inheritance tax, which means that it's a privilege, it's not a right. Confiscation of all property of all immigrants and rebels. That's what the Chinese do. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Well, gee, that sounds like the Federal Reserve Bank. Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. Well, that's all there. It's kind of ironic. Last night when I got checked into my hotel, I was kind of channel surfing, and Enemy of the State was on with Will Smith, and that movie's an old movie, and that technology has been around for 50 years, and here were the NSA and all the rest of it. It's much worse now, and that's why I say Obama was a textbook tyrant, because he was that's exactly, Aristotle is the one that defined what a tyrant is. And Obama was definitely, he fit every dimension of it. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. Well, certainly, and again, it comes down to if these farmers are paying property taxes, then it's really owned by the government. Equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. And so, I'm not sure that that is in place. Some of it is. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of population over the country. So they want to eliminate cities. That's not even happening in China. Although maybe it is, maybe it is. Free education for all children in the public schools. They've certainly taken over the educational system. Most of our kids are complete. They come out of there and they're indoctrinated, not educated. Yeah. Anyways, this is Article 1 of the Lieber Code. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation and conquest. The presence of a hostile army proclaims this martial law. Yes?
You might want to explain for the people here what the Lieber Code is so that they have an understanding of that.
Lieber Code is also known as General Orders 100. It was written by Francis Lieber under directions from Lincoln. And it's the law of the armed forces of the U.S. And it's what they operated under during the Civil War. Article 2 of the Lieber Code. Martial law does not cease during a hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in a treaty of peace. Well, I can tell you there's been no treaty of peace with the southern states. I have not seen a treaty of peace with any of the states. Like Arizona, for example, there is a treaty of Hidalgo. But it doesn't say anything in there. It says, or special mention in a treaty of peace. The Treaty of Hidalgo would be considered the treaty of peace for Arizona and parts of California and New Mexico, but it doesn't say anything about the martial law ending. And why do you think these cops that are running around here have these military uniforms? So there's been no treaty of peace and there's been no special proclamation either. I've never seen anything mentioned about martial law ending. So we have martial law in place, and it has been since the Civil War. Now, you can have a benevolent dictator and you can have a tyrant, and maybe you get to pick your dictator, but he's still a dictator. And once you understand all of that, that's why, Trump is definitely someone that's trying, he's working towards freedom and everything like that, but the bottom line is though he's still a dictator at the end of the day. Actually, Congress is the real dictator. Congress has passed on all of these through these, there's a bunch of acts of Congress that have given Trump emergency powers, especially during, like the Trading with the Enemy Act. There's a bunch of them that Congress has given the power to Trump. So, it's really Congress. It's all coming from Congress. Article 10 of the Lieber Code refers mainly, martial law affects chiefly the police and the collection of public revenue and taxes, whether imposed by the expelled government or by the invader. See, there's no difference. See, the martial law, if there's martial law before, right, then people won't even notice the difference. When somebody invades, it's just someone else is collecting the money. As a matter of fact, the checks go to the same people. They take over. And it's no different to the slaves, basically, that you have no idea, there's nothing changed. And that's the idea. Remember what happened with Norman Dodd? He said it's their objective to make it so that the Soviet Union and the United States could be merged. Oh, and look at that, that's the New World slave flag. So governors like Abbott are issuing their edicts under their military dictatorship to ensure their property, is safe. Okay, remember, it talks about the martial law refers mainly to the support and efficiency of the army and safety and the safety of its operations. If they're talking about safety, they're talking about safety of their property. So they're worried about your safety, they think they own you. Papers, please. That's actually Berwick, Dollar Vigilante, something I got off of there. Congress created 2 classes of citizens to enslave everybody. Congress gave governments permission to screen for the low intelligence for their code enforcers, and I'll show this all throughout here. Congress granted plausible deniability to their order followers so they can rape, pillage, and murder as much as they like and then claim good faith immunity. I mean, how many times, especially during the Obama administration, haven't seen it too much during Trump because Trump is trying to put an end to it. But under Obama, I mean, the people that were getting murdered by the police, it was like almost every night. Congress mandated fluoride in the drinking water to dumb down the people for their concentration camps. Congress refuses to approve the International Criminal Court because they intend to engage in war crimes. Congress created the Roman cult Sestake Trust as a mechanism to enslave everybody, collateralize their so-called debt, and sell everybody into slavery. Congress mandated everybody register their births to compel everybody in their slavery system. Congress created administrative law based on fraudulent, fictitious contracts as a mechanism for slavery. You volunteered. They get you to volunteer. That's all what it's all about. Congress created all sorts of prisons to facilitate their military dictatorship and their slavery agenda. At common law, there's no prisons. All these prisons it's all martial law. Congress gave the president the power to make war without congressional approval as a mechanism of slavery all over the planet. And so good presidents, Trump, he's not doing that stuff, and that's good. But Obama, he was in wars all over the place, and it's kind of interesting that he got the Nobel Peace Prize, exactly. And it was before, when he was early on in his presidency, because they intended that he go ahead and do exactly what he did. So, you know, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, I used to have a bumper sticker that actually said Barack Obama was dropped more bombs than any Nobel Peace Prize winner in history.
Yeah, no joke, eh? Anyways, Congress mandated Child Protective Services to engage in theft of our children to facilitate the pedophilia industry. Congress mandated child support in their so-called court to impoverish people and support their prison industry. Congress has converted all of the states and the territories with their international law rule, their administrative law, and their so-called contracts. Congress mandated filing fees for their bar members to convert a court case into a commercial transaction so the bought and paid for a whore selling as just us can sit there and play stupid and then they use their millions of codes, rules, and regulations against you. That's what happens when you have martial law, because martial law supersedes and replaces common law, and so they have to codify everything, like murder and things like that. That a common law, that's the unwritten law. So murder is understood. You're not supposed to be killing people. There was actually a really good video I watched recently with Judge Napolitano. That guy is brilliant. And he went through and explained about all of that. And this was on YouTube. Congress imposed a military dictatorship to supersede and replace common law. Congress mandating their so-called real ID for their slaves to fabricate evidence of their slaves for their bar members' presumptions. Congress has given pharmaceutical companies immunity for their poisonous vaccines. That's one of the things that Trump is dealing with right now because, and it's the Senate, it's the Republicans work with the Democrats on this stuff, okay? In other words, the Democrats are the spendthrifts. They want to spend money like mad. And the Republicans, they're very authoritarian. So the Republicans want to have, this is what Mitch McConnell is after, is he wants to make sure that these medical doctors and the vaccine companies have immunity so they can go ahead and peddle their poisons and get away with it. And in the Congress, the Democrats want to spend money like mad. And they work together on this stuff. One's as bad as the next, really. And so it's all coming from Congress. Congress has authorized naked short selling on Wall Street. There's 3 kinds of martial law. This is taken from a case called Ex parte versus Milligan. Or no, just Ex parte Milligan, U.S. Supreme Court. This is a Civil War era case. Full martial law, declaration of martial law is issued. Troops are on the streets. It's used only during wartime. It's used on a foreign country or when actually invaded by a foreign power to put down an armed rebellion. Martial law proper is the law of the armed forces. When a captain tells a private what to do, it's enforced by court-martial. And the final one is the law of necessity and emergency, allows the domestic use of martial law powers. It's used during peace times, and it can continue for centuries during a military occupation. And that's taken from a book called Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. A society whose citizens refuse to see and investigate the facts, who refuse to believe that their government and their media will routinely lie to them and fabricate a reality contrary to verifiable facts, is a society that chooses and deserves the police state dictatorship it is going to get. Amen. That's right. Martial law is the public law of necessity. Necessity calls its force, necessity justifies its exercise, and necessity measures the extent and degree to which it may be employed. That necessity is no formal, artificial, legalistic concept, but an actual and factual one. It is the necessity of taking action to safeguard the state against insurrection, riot, disorder, or public calamity. What constitutes necessity is a question of fact in each case. And that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary. And when you watch that video by Celeste, she talks about that, okay? She talks about that and how everything changes when they put it under martial law. But you got to understand, again, the martial law only applies in a certain jurisdiction. And the key is to establish yourself as not being in that jurisdiction. But they're not going to tell you that, okay? Again, you have to know the law. And if you expect some bureaucrat to tell you that, you know, they're going to say, no, that doesn't exist. And because if you expect a bureaucrat to tell you, then you're incompetent. And if you're incompetent, then you're a slave. Necessity is the plea of every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. The action of Congress in the passage of the first Legal Tender Act was placed distinctly upon the ground of the existing imperative need of government, and the Legal Tender Clause was urged and adopted as a war measure. And that's U.S. Supreme Court, Juilliard versus Greenman, 1884. Congress, claiming its martial law power to declare war, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, imposed martial law on the United States and never discontinued it. The result was an extension of military and municipal jurisdiction of Congress. But where's the evidence of this? Look at the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the Legal Tender Laws, the 14th Amendment, etc., etc. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. The 14th Amendment is an extension of national military powers presently used in a municipal character and enforced by municipal laws stretched far beyond their original limitations and enforced in Article 1 tribunals, okay? That means he's not a judge, he's a military commissioner. You need to understand that. I bring that issue up in Texas all the time because in Texas there's Article 2 of the Texas Constitution says that there's 3 separate branches of government, and one officer of one branch of government cannot work for the other branch of government, which means that a judge that's working as a military commissioner perjured his oath. And I bring that stuff up and they don't want to talk to me. That's in my documents. But so I'll bet you there's something similar to that in Arkansas. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. Despotism's military dictatorship, and this isn't new. This is causes and necessities for taking up arms in 1775. This is what happened. This is why they had the War of Independence in the first place, is because of the same kind of stuff that's happening right now. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Well, the first thing I always thought when I read that is, well, how do you tell the difference between a republican form of government and what's not? Well, I got some stuff for you. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. That's an evidence of they were using banknotes, right? And that's evidence of international law. Banknotes fall under international law. That was not a republican form of government. Here's another one. But in considering the question, a republic is not international law. International law and law of nations are interchangeable phrases, by the way. But in considering the question before us, it must be borne in mind that there is no law of nations standing between the people of the United States and their government, okay? That's when you get a republican form of government. The government shields you from international law. But you have to stay out of those things, out of what they view to be contracts. In other words, Federal Reserve notes, that's negotiable instrument law. That falls under international law. And so what I do, like if you look at my price lists over here, okay, it says at the bottom in the fine print, it says that I always prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the fake money. So I'm accepting it because I have to, not because I want to. It's not a privilege, it's a compelled benefit, and so therefore I'm not volunteering into it. I'm very vociferous about that. I put it in all my videos, but again, we all have to understand that, and that's only one way that they do it. There's a whole bunch of ways that they do it. The purpose of a republican form of government is to shield we the people from international law. Martial law is international law. That falls under the law of nations. A state does not owe its origin to the government of the United States in the highest or any of its branches. It was in existence before it. It derives its authority from the same pure and sacred source as itself, the voluntary and deliberate choice of the people. A state is altogether exempt from the jurisdiction of the courts of the United States or from any other exterior authority, unless in the special instances where the general government has power derived from the Constitution itself. The question to be determined is whether this state, so respectable, whose claims soar so high, is amenable to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of the United States. This question, important in itself, will depend on others, more important still, and may perhaps be ultimately resolved into one, no less radical than this. Do the people of the United States form a nation? By that law, the several states and governments spread over our globe are considered as forming a society, not a nation. So, again, this was in 1794. This is U.S. Supreme Court, and they're talking about Georgia. And so, at that time, in 1794, there was no nations on the planet. There was just corporations. And that's what they, so that was, you know, in the Declaration of Independence, it says, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to separate their bonds from another, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, we need to tell them why. And then it goes on, it says, when something like, when we're being a series of events that are going to reduce us under absolute despotism, it is our right, it is our duty to throw off such a government. Well, that was, this governments, the so-called governments, were corporations, is what they were throwing off. And the first thing they did is in 1871, they set up a corporation here. And so that's what they did, and that was the same kind of thing, where a series of events have been happening that are going to reduce us to slavery. It's exactly what's going on. Again, same thing.
Is that like when they had like the Dutch East India Company and stuff like that? Is that what you mean when you say corporation?
Well, even the governments. The King George signed the definitive treaty of peace as the King of England and France. Okay? Well, what happened is in 1213 in England, King John signed the concessions to the Pope he agreed to pay the Pope tribute. And so he basically turned the King of England, a kingdom, into a corporation. You see what I'm saying? They were all corporations. France was a corporation. And so King George actually financed both sides of the War of Independence, as evidenced by the definitive treaty peace of 1783. 1783? I think it's 1783. Huh?
Yes.
Anyways, so the point is that they were all corporations. They might have been called the Kingdom of England or the Kingdom of France, but it's just a corporation. It's all an illusion. You see what I'm saying? And they've done the same thing here. United States is a corporation. And in fact, I'm going to show you in this presentation. We'll get to it. Oh, right here. Articles of Confederation. The style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. But yet, if you look at the passport, what does it say? It says United States of America. And a passport is a military document. Okay, so the United States of America cannot turn, that would be treason for our de jure government to convert our right to travel into a privilege by issuing us a passport. And so that's why they use the other corporation, the unconstitutional corporation. And if you look, here's the passport defined. A passport's a written document given to a person or persons by a commander of belligerent forces authorizing him or them to travel unmolested within the district occupied by his troops. Passports are issued by the State Department or other similar office in other countries to diplomatic agents and others entering or traveling in foreign countries, which are of the same general character as those issued during war. And this is taken from the Rules of Land Warfare, 1914 edition, Passport, Safe Conduct, Safeguards, and Cartels, Chapter 7, Section 4, Article 276, page 100. And this, look at the Federal Reserve note. It says, the United States of America. They know how to spell the name properly. And notice it says this is a silver certificate. Even if you look at the Federal Reserve notes now, it's the United States of America.
And what's the difference with that without the V on the passport? What does that mean?
That means it's the unconstitutional corporation that was set up in 1871. See what I'm saying?
One's corporate, one's de jure.
One's corporate and one's de jure. One's lawful.
Corporate and which one's the de jure? The one with V or the?
The one with the is the de jure one. At common law, only gold and silver are legal tender, yes.
I just saw that there might be still some clouds on that, Glenn. Can I comment, please?
Sure.
Okay, so the Articles of Confederation is the first constitution that we have here as the four organic constitutions. You can find that in the United States Code, the very first booklet, United States Code, Title I, and they talk about the four organic laws of the United States of America. And the Articles of Confederation is the first constitution. And in that first constitution, it defines the name by a style. Style is not the same as spelling. Spelling is ABC, the letters. Style is capital, lowercase, etc. The style of this confederacy shall be, not the spelling. He just showed you the Articles of Confederation. The style is, and that is the name of the United States of America, the organization that started this ball rolling. So what Glenn is showing you here is that the very first organized style of the Confederation was altered, and these other attributes that we're actually experiencing we were experiencing them under United States of America, not the Confederacy that was created. That's right. I'm trying to make that clear. Did that make that clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of the stuff, all of the encroachments, all of the stuff, like this military or this medical dictatorship that they're imposing right now, is United States of America. It's not the United States of America. And that's why you see the president, matter of fact, Trump, one time, there was a YouTube video about it where I think it's Pence. No, it was Secretary of State Pompeo was speaking, and Trump is standing about 3 feet behind him. and Pompeo says, this is an exercise, and Trump says, kind of quietly behind it, you should have told me. It's all a big false flag operation is what it is. They want to see what people will do. That's exactly what it is. Anyways. So at common law, only gold or silver coin are legal tender. Now, if all you have in your wallet is a Federal Reserve note, and I think I'm going to go into it, it's right here. There is a distinction between a debt discharged and one paid. When discharged, the debt still exists, though divested of its character as a legal obligation during the operation of the discharge. Discharge falls under the law of nations, under international law again, okay? So again, remember I was saying, if you use Federal Reserve notes and you don't qualify that, then that's a privilege. The Supreme Court has ruled that everybody not privileged is sovereign. Okay, you're the king. But once you accept a privilege, then you become a slave. Basically, you're their property. They can do anything they want. And the Federal Reserve notes are a good example. They're, when you use Federal Reserve notes, because they don't pay anything. The only thing that pays is gold or silver coin. That's why I carry in my wallet $1. This is a Silver Eagle. You can't see it too well, it's dark in here, but this is a Silver Eagle that I carry in my wallet at all times. And so technically, anybody that has Federal Reserve notes in their wallets, if that's all they have in their wallet, they are technically bankrupt. And I've even gone to banks and I've asked them, I said, so do you have any Silver Eagles here? And they say, what's that? And I say, well, technically, you know, if all you got here is Federal Reserve notes, that you're technically bankrupt. And it kind of gets an interesting conversation going. But so the point is that if all you have, I don't care how many, if you got millions of them in your wallet, that you're technically a pauper. Okay, and paupers at common law don't have any rights. And because, remember, at common law, only gold or silver coin are legal tender, then technically you don't have common law. You just volunteered for international law. That falls under international law, and under international law, you only have rights they give you. And those rights can be taken away. They can do whatever they want. This is Clearfield Trust Company versus United States. Governments descend to the level of mere private corporation, take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen where private corporate commercial paper and securities is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. So when you get a tax bill, that's not the government, okay? That's a private corporation. And so that's why I use the Form 1020. You'll see some of my Form 1020s over there. And I can't tell you how many tax bills gone away when I sent them that thing. And sometimes I have to send them a notice of default, an opportunity to cure, and then a subsequent notice of default. And sometimes I even have to send it to the, like if there's an attorney, I'll file a bar complaint against the attorney. And you know, you have to elevate it sometimes, but guaranteed it goes away, it disappears. And because you're offering, with that Form 1020, you're offering to pay, you're saying, tell me what to pay. And they're never going to tell you that they're an unconstitutional corporation. They have not a shred of authority, and what they want is Federal Reserve notes, and they have no authority. They're just a bunch of thieves, is what they are. Anyways, governments lose their immunity and descend to the level of private corporations when involved in commercial activity enforcing negotiable instruments as in fines, penalties, assessment, bails, taxes. The remedy lies in the hands of the state and its municipalities seeking remedy. Copies of these documents can be found on my website, linked under my recent videos. I've got like these Form 1020s, my notice of void judgment, my bar member complaints. Those are actually, I've been uploading them onto Google Docs lately, and I put a link under the video. And I've got YouTube videos about all of this stuff. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries and other books and forms, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. I've got a price list over there. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin. But as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the Federal Reserve notes, the military script, the fake money, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. You know, I had a guy that sent me an email. It was Taxman. I'm serious. And he sent me an email. He wanted my price list. So I sent it to him. And I never heard back from him. I don't understand why. He didn't want to buy any of my stuff. But once he saw it said, again, they cannot compel you to a benefit. A benefit is only something that you want to have. They can presume, if you don't make a specific objection, they can presume that you want the benefit, but when you tell them that I prefer gold or silver coin, and then there's nothing they can do. I took the Supreme Court, I should say I took the IRS to the Supreme Court twice, and they don't want to talk to me anyways, but you never know. If they want to open a dialogue, I know what to tell them. Anyways, this is the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. As used in this act, the term United States means government of the United States. The term currency of the United States means currency which is legal tender in the United States and includes United States notes and Federal Reserve notes. So Federal Reserve notes are meant for internal use of the government only. If you use Federal Reserve notes, then you're telling them that you're a government employee. The forced loans of 1862 and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. They formed a part of the public debt of the United States. So, national supremacy, okay, that means federal supremacy. Forced loans, this is again U.S. Supreme Court, Juilliard versus Greenman. Federal Reserve notes are commercial paper. Federal Reserve notes are a forced loan. Federal Reserve notes are IOUs. All commercial paper falls into two categories. It's either a promissory note or an IOU. I don't care, stocks, bonds, whatever. It used to be that the Federal Reserve note was a promissory note. It said that you could go and get some silver or some gold. But now all it says is this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And so that means that it's just an IOU. So what it does is it creates a trust. When you give someone the Federal Reserve note, then you're basically saying, some guy promised to pay me, and when he pays me, I'll pay you. It's essentially what you're saying. But that's what they want. Gold certificates and silver certificates were promissory note. You can never pay a debt with the Federal Reserve note because they discharge the debt with limited liability. It will never pay the debt. That's why that Form 1020 works so well. They send you something in the mail saying you need to pay this. Well, okay, no problem. I'll be happy to pay it. Tell me what to pay it with. And they'll never tell you. I went into court one time, federal court, and I took some silver eagles. And I said, okay, I got some silver eagles here. And the first thing they did is convert them into Federal Reserve notes. So I said, well, if you're going to do that, then I'll just keep them. And so I brought back a money order. At that time, that's what I did. But the point is that they want the Federal Reserve notes. They're not lawful or de jure. They're nothing but thieves and pirates. And it exposes them for that. I filed a case into the Fifth Circuit here. I don't know, is Arkansas in the Fifth Circuit? Eighth? Yeah, in Texas it's the Fifth Circuit. And I filed an appeal into the Fifth Circuit, and I sent them my Form 1020, saying, what do you want me to pay? And it was kind of interesting because in the lower court, see, when you file an appeal and you have to pay the filing fee, then you have to pay it into the district court that it originated in. And they went, and I didn't have a chance to go through the procedure because you have to do a Form 1020 and then a notice of default, an opportunity to cure, and then a final notice of default, right? So it takes about a month, maybe 45 days to go through the whole procedure. And what happened was I didn't get through the complete procedure before the district court dismissed my case because I failed to pay the filing fee. And so, but then when it went to the Court of Appeals, they said, well, you can go ahead and file the impecuniosity statement here. If they turned it down, file it here. And so by the time I filed it there, I had filed the Form 1020. And so I filed with their impecuniosity form, I just NA out all the blanks. Where they want the name, NA. And where they want the income, okay, spouse, all that stuff. I just NA'd every blank in it. And I said, please see attached affidavit. And so then I made an affidavit, and I incorporated the Form 1020 into it, and some other stuff, and they accepted the case.
It's awesome.
Huh?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe half of us understood what you said. Does everybody understand what he just did?
Yep.
No, are you gonna explain that more thoroughly later?
No.
I used the Form 1020. They basically, well, I'm not sure if it was the Form 1020 or if it was other arguments. They'll never tell you, okay? All they did is send me a letter, your case has been docketed. That's all they do.
Can I break it down to palatable people version? Do you mind?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so basically they were asking him for court filing fees. But what Glenn did was say, how would you like me to pay them? And they weren't going to say, we want you to pay in Federal Reserve notes, because they're not allowed to tell you what species. So instead of, and so he juxtapositioned the case where they dismissed it for lack of paying the filing fees, but he went ahead and appealed the dismissal to the Court of Appeals, correct?
No.
You appealed?
No, I appealed the dismissal, but the dismissal wasn't for not paying the filing fees. The dismissal was for a separate reason. But when I filed the appeal, you have to pay the filing fee in the district court. And I did the same argument in the district court, except that I wasn't able to include the Form 1020 because I hadn't completed the procedure.
Right, and the Form 1020 is basically a questionnaire which gives the party who's asking for the money, or excuse me, asking for the fee, an occasion to tell what they're asking. Please tell me what you're asking for. Is it gold? Is it silver? Is it Federal Reserve notes? And they will not respond to that. And so he used that very simple form, and he got his case filed without paying the quote-unquote filing fee, which was meant for attorneys anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Anyways, so General Orders 100, which is the Lieber Code, Article 37, talks about forced loans. Okay, the rule does not interfere with the right of victorious invader to tax the people or their property, to levy forced loans. Okay, so we are under military occupation. The Supreme Court said forced loans of 1862 and 1863. Okay, and so we are. The Supreme Court said we're under a military occupation by saying that. See what I'm saying? And so. In despotic governments, the government has usurped in a similar manner both upon the state and the people, hence all arbitrary doctrines and pretensions concerning the supreme, absolute, and uncontrollable power of government, and each man is degraded from the prime rank which he ought to hold in human affairs. In the latter, the state as well as the man is degraded. And of both degradations, striking instances occur in history and politics and in common life. That's Chisholm versus Georgia, U.S. Supreme Court, 1794. Banknotes constitute a large and convenient part of the currency of our country, and by common consent serve a great extent the purposes of coin. In themselves, they are not money, for they are not legal tender. So Federal Reserve notes, right? Banknotes and Federal Reserve notes are banknotes. For they are not legal tender, and yet they're good tender unless specifically objected to. Nobody has to accept them. As being notes merely and not money. They subserve the purposes of money in the ordinary business of life, but by mutual consent, express or implied, of the parties to a contract, and not by the binding force of any common usage, for the party to whom they may be tendered has an undoubted right to refuse accepting them as money. When you accept them, that's a contract. Cryptocurrency is not a forced loan. We just went today to try and buy some Bitcoin. We actually found a Bitcoin ATM, but it wanted too much information. So we're actually, after this meeting, we're thinking about going and trying another one and see if we can do it. If anybody's interested in coming to see how it's done, you're welcome to. Anything can be used as a media exchange as long as we agree to it. It's called barter. But in fact and in law, such statutes are intended to be applied to those who are here as residents in this state under the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Federal Constitution and the so-called 14th Amendment. And that's actually not a quote from that case, that's a summary. That's United States versus United Mine Workers, 1947, U.S. Supreme Court. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page was been deleted. I deleted it myself because of censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group, Sovereignty International, is being deleted. That's on Facebook. Although I haven't been there in months. I don't even go to Facebook anymore. My Yahoo private group is called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants, and my Google private group is called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants. Follow me on Twitter at Engineer Win. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. BitChute, I've got a profile there, but I don't have much up there because they limit my file size. And Patreon is Sovereignty International, and I've got a MeWe group. And yeah, it's kind of an unusual number, but it's basically Sovereignty International. But that's how you search for it, I guess. Anyways, Congress created the two classes of citizens for the purpose of enslaving everybody. The term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states in that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. That's U.S. versus Anthony, 1873. Citizenship is a political status and may be defined and privilege limited by Congress, 1925. So again, if you're a U.S. citizen, see, I mean, think about it. Originally, there was separate states, right? And this is what I do in my statement of original status, is I show that my ancestors were in Virginia. I've got actually a pedigree chart, and it shows that I have ancestors in Virginia, North Carolina, and several of the states at the time of, or before the Declaration of Independence. And so, matter of fact, several of the colonies. And so, there's maxims of law, and we're going to go into those, that say that no civil law can destroy right of blood. And there's also maxims of law that say that that which is created can never be greater than that created it. And so, and I basically say that your oath of office is to me. And when I do that, they just like, poof, and they're gone. Anyways, well, we're going to get into that in this presentation towards the end. And then I'm going to have, I got sample documents over there, my corporate denial affidavit, and the statement of original status. And I'll be glad to send any Word files to anybody that requests it. Citizenship, oh, I got that already. Every taxpayer is assessed to pay trust having sufficient interest in preventing the abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. And that's, again, that's the U.S. citizens assessed to pay trust. Slater's protestations to the effect that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligations to pay income tax. Legal, so that means it's a contract. Unless the defendant can establish that he is not a citizen of the United States, the IRS possesses authority to attempt to determine his federal tax liability. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. Article 3 is the judiciary. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power, that means military dictatorship, folks. Through their plenary power, nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. And this is National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, 1948, U.S. Supreme Court. This is an act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia. That is now called United States Code. That's true. Okay, so DC Code is now called United States Code. That's true. And the legal estate to be in necessity use, that's located at 31 Stat 1432, Chapter 56, Section 1617. The legal estate to be in necessity use. This is more from the DC Code, approved March 3rd, 1901, at 31 Stat 1189. Be it further enacted that in the interpretation and construction of said code, the following rules shall be observed, namely, the word person shall be held to apply to partnerships and corporations. It's all for corporations. It's corporate law. That's why you have to do a corporate denial affidavit. It's all corporate law. An act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia, which was approved March 3rd, 1901 by the 56th Congress. Absence of 7 years, presumption of death. So they presume that you're one of their slaves. Okay, again, corporations are property. That's why they're a slave, because they're property. If you read those old court cases before the Civil War, there's slavery was involved. The debate in the case is always over property rights. If you are property, you are a slave. And think about it. When you pay taxes to the IRS, you are working for the IRS for nothing. That sounds like slavery to me. That's exactly what it is slavery. That's why I don't pay taxes to the IRS. And if they want to talk to me about it, I'll be happy to talk to them about it, but they don't want to. I took them to the Supreme Court twice, and they don't want to talk to me. And that's okay, I don't mind. This is where it's codified. Title 15, United States Code, Section 44. A corporation shall be deemed to include any trust company, so-called Massachusetts Trust or Association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital stock or certificates of interest, and it goes through the same definition except it doesn't have shares of capital stock or certificates of interest. That is a cesticate trust. Doesn't have shares of capital or certificates of interest. So the cesticate trust falls under that definition. And this is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. Says, yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. This is all coming from the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal feoffees to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal feoffee, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy, that's the Roman cult, folks, to be bound in conscience to account to the cesticate use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. So again, it's all started with the Roman cult, and they talk about the Cesticate v. Trust Act of 1666 in England, and it goes back before that. They say that in Rome burned. Remember Caesar, when was it Nero that burned Rome? And they were doing the same thing. This has been going on for thousands of years. They screen out intelligent people in the hiring process for their LEOs, okay? Think about it. Law enforcement, okay? That means it's military dictatorship. They're forcing you to follow their codes. And enforcement, that's military dictatorship. And Jordan versus City of New London, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, case number 99-9188. Robert Jordan had a master's degree and scored too high in their intelligence test. He's too intelligent. They don't want people with intelligence doing those jobs. This is ABC News article, New London, Connecticut, September 8, 2000. A man whose bid to become a police officer was rejected after he scored too high on an intelligence test. Has lost an appeal in his federal lawsuit against the city. That way they can have good faith. That's why they don't want anybody with intelligence doing those jobs, okay? This is Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 38.23, evidence not to be used. Says no evidence obtained by an officer or other person in violation of the provisions or constitutional laws of the state of Texas or of the constitutional laws of the United States of America shall be admitted in evidence against the accused on the trial of any criminal case. And then paragraph B, and that sounds so good in paragraph A, but then paragraph B kind of ruins it all. It is an exception to the provisions of subsection A of this article that the evidence was obtained by a law enforcement officer acting in objective good faith reliance upon a warrant issued by a neutral magistrate based on probable cause. Well, there's no such thing as a neutral magistrate. And 99% of the time they don't have probable cause. This is federal statutes say the same thing. A good faith reliance on a court warrant or order, a grand jury subpoena, a legislative authorization, or a statutory authorization, including a request of a governmental entity under Section 2703F of this title, a request of an investigative or law enforcement officer under Section 2518.7 of this title, or a good faith determination that Section 2511.3 of this title permitted the conduct complained of, is a complete defense to any civil or criminal action brought under this chapter or any other law. That's DC Code again, right? 18 U.S. 2707. Banks all fall under international law. Military dictatorship is international law. Uniform Commercial Code, international law. All codes, rules, and regulations all fall under international law. Forced loans is probably the single most important thing for a military despotism. It makes it so the courts can presume that you do not pay a debt. It makes everybody into paupers, and paupers have no rights except what they allow you to have. According to Norm Franz, gold is the money of kings, silver is the money of gentlemen, barter is the money of peasants, debt is the money of slaves. And that's what you have. That's what Federal Reserve notes are. Federal Reserve was set up under the insurance laws of the United States. Federal Reserve notes are quote-unquote worthless insurance script. Anything purchased with worthless insurance script is the property of the issuer of the script. Taxes are the fee for using the private money system. If you use it as a benefit, okay? If it's a compelled benefit, then there's no taxes. The single most important requirement for a Republican form of government is lawful money. So that's one of the things, okay? Remember we talked about Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, a Republican form of government. You have to have lawful money. Trump is working on that. I think that, according to Penny Kelly, she said that he's going to announce in August a new money system if he gets reelected. Congress has sold themselves to the Roman cult. Congress has breached the trust. Congress is engaged in treason. All the stimulus is paid by anyone with a Social Security number in the form of Federal Reserve notes. Under Title V, United States Code, Section 552AA13, the term federal personnel means individuals entitled to receive immediate or deferred retirement benefits under any retirement program of the government in the United States, including survivor benefits. So that means anybody with a Social Security number. Lawful money is not Federal Reserve notes. Lawful money is not bank notes. Lawful money is not forced loans. Lawful money is not discharged debts. Lawful money is not international law. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit at Engineer Win. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Engineer Win. I should say Steemit at Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. I'm going to upload this video to YouTube. On YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. That's the front page of my channel. The bell or the subscribe button's already been clicked. Otherwise it'd be red. The bell hasn't been clicked. It'd look like it's vibrating, so the arrow's pointing at the bell. What's proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power. That's Attorney General's opinion, February 3rd, 1857. That's why they have to pass statutes for common law offenses, okay? So under martial law, there's no law. So they have to pass statutes for common law offenses. That's why all statutes are international law and edicts under martial law. We can't begin to count the number of times judges, lawyers, and statesmen have said there isn't any common law anymore, it's been replaced by statutes. They would be more truthful if they said there isn't any common law anymore, it's been replaced by martial law. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellwood of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. There's no common law of the United States as contradistinguished from individual states, and courts of the United States, instead of administering common law in any particular system, conform to the law of the states where they are situated. That's an old case, 1855. More recent cases are here. There's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. Same thing in all the states. All the states are under martial law too. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. Under a military dictatorship, there's no law, which is why they are required to pass statutes for common law crimes like murder and assault. This creates civil law, which creates a democracy. Under a military dictatorship, you have a democracy, and democracy is international law. I have exclusive content available on my website and on Patreon. The website has 2 subscription levels, and I accept cryptocurrencies. $29.99 a year for the videos only, $49.99 a year for the videos, plus unlimited email consultations. I'm not a liar. Well, I meant an attorney. No, I meant a liar. But I can tell you what I would do under certain circumstances and where to find the forms. The only power that the New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. And so if you want to make a donation buy a subscription as a donation, it's a modest donation, there's no doubt, but every little bit helps, and it's all appreciated. Some of my content is Arlington Private Information Share, Land Deed Training. There's actually 3 videos of that. Estoppel Certificates Training, Foreclosure Estoppel Certificates Training, Corporate Denial Training, Toll Roads Notice and Demand Training, Invoice Training, Notice of Void Judgment Training, Revocation of Signature Training, Third-Party Witness Training, and Federal Habeas Corpus Training. Revocation of Voter Registration, Criminal Complaint Training, there's about 3 videos of that. Lawsuit Training, 1 video, and there's going to be more of that. Other training, depending on people having requests and whether it's something I can do or not. Northeast Private Information Share videos are also up there. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free, linked under my videos or on my website. All exclusive content is on my website, and you can buy a subscription there, and also there's my Patreon link there at Sovereignty International. They've been telling people for decades that we're in a democracy. Do you think it's by accident? Check out my other videos, Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Code Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 7, Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Laws Here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 19, Canada Border Pigs Playlist, Bar Members and their Satanic Connections Playlist. This is the concessions of England to the Pope, 1213. This has been going on for thousands of years. We will establish a perpetual obligation and concession. We will establish that from the proper and special revenues of our aforesaid kingdom, for all the service and customs that we ought to render to them, saying, in all things the penny of St. Peter, the Roman Church shall receive yearly 1,000 marks sterling. Namely, at the Feast of St. Michael, 500 marks, and at Easter, 500 marks. Or no, 500 marks. And then it says 700 for the Kingdom of England and 300 for the Kingdom of Ireland. And that's concessions to England, of England to the Pope, 1213. Remember I said that England is owned and operated by the Roman cult, and this is it. So this happened in England, and it precipitated the War of Independence, and it's happening again today. This is a map. Most people don't have the courage to share this. The City of London Corporation, if you notice there, it's just a small area, a couple miles. This small little country that almost no one has heard about funded all sides of World War I, World War II, and will start World War III if we do not stop them. That's where the Parliament buildings are held. If anybody's ever watched the convening of the Imperial Parliament, what happens is the Queen goes to a gate in this area called Temple Bar, and she has to get permission to go in there. She goes and beats on this big oak door, and the Lord Mayor of London's on the other side, and he opens up this little 1 square foot thing, and he says, "What do you want?" to the Queen of England. And she has to get his permission to walk down there, and somebody has to be left as a ransom to make sure that they allow her to come back, and she has to walk 2 steps behind the Lord Mayor of London the whole time she's there. That's when she does the throne speech. I don't know if anybody's ever watched that. After the concessions of England to the Pope in 1213 was signed, King John had to make money to pay his tribute. King John imposed martial law rule and started to do things to raise money to pay his tribute. It took only 2 years for the people to figure out what was happening, and the Magna Carta was the result. This is a Canadian case. Perlman versus Pichet, and the Attorney General of Canada reference habeas corpus. The Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John, neither is it a treaty. For we cannot say it was concluded between 2 legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between 2 nations, nor is it law. The barons do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon him. Magna Carta is therefore a contract, but resembles a treaty concluded between 2 nations, in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other. So, again, that's international law. And so they stuck a sword to his throat and they said, "Here, king, we want you to sign this." That's essentially what they did. They probably didn't actually stick a sword to his throat. They probably just stood around him and said, "Here, sign this before we run you through." Anyways, Section 13 of the Magna Carta, this is all evidence of the military dictatorship. The City of London shall have its ancient liberties and free customs. So they were charging people to go in and out of the city, as well by land and by water. Furthermore, we decree and grant that all other cities, boroughs, towns, and ports shall have all their liberties and free customs. So they were other cities. They were charging people to go in and out. No village or individual shall be compelled to make bridges at riverbanks except those of old who are legally bound to do so. So they were coming up with all sorts of reasons why people had to pay for stuff themselves. No sheriff, constable, coroners, or others of our bailiff shall hold pleas of our crown. What do you think the cop does on the side of the road? He's holding your pleas right there. You see that? It's exactly what the cop does on the side of the road when they stop you. No constable or other bailiff of ours shall take corn or other provisions from anyone without immediate tendering money therefore. So they were stealing people's stuff and saying, "We're just going to take it, and if you don't like it, tough." No sheriff or bailiff or other person shall take the horses, carts of any man for transport duty. So they're saying, "Well, we want you to take us over here, and if you don't like it, tough."
Hey, Glenn,
Yeah.
if I didn't understand, maybe some others don't understand. What do you mean by the police officer taking a plea on the side of the road?
Well, that's again, no sheriff or constable shall, or coroners or others of our bailiff shall hold pleas of our crown. I mean, the cop stops you on the side of the road. He's asking for your plea.
What does that mean, asking for your plea?
Well, can I see your driver's license, registration, insurance? He's asking you to give evidence against yourself. See what I'm saying? That's asking you for information. That's basically giving evidence against yourself. It's exactly what he's doing. And then he gives you a ticket or a citation or something like that. Okay, this is all stuff that, of course, the Magna Carta doesn't apply here. You can't argue the Magna Carta here. That's in England. You see what I'm saying? But the Magna Carta, what the Magna Carta does is it brings in common law into England, and then common law eventually came here. So you can argue common law, but you can't be arguing Magna Carta. Anyways, neither we nor our bailiffs shall take for our castles for any other work of ours wood that's not ours. So they were stealing people's wood. No bailiff for the future shall upon his own unsupported claim put anyone to his law without credible witnesses. That's another thing the cops do, is they put you to their law, and they don't have witnesses. You see what I'm saying? And their law being, well, you were speeding. You see what I'm saying? To none will we sell, to no one will refuse, delay, right, or justice, and they sell justice all the time. Anyways, so bankruptcy and military occupation after the concessions to the Pope precipitated the Magna Carta. Bankruptcy and military occupation in colonial days precipitated the War of Independence, and replaced the true 13th Amendment with the current so-called 13th Amendment. It allowed bar members to infiltrate. 70 to 90% of members of Congress and the legislatures are bar members.
What is the bar again?
It stands for British Accredited Regency, actually, but there's statutes that say that you can't be a judge unless you're a member of the bar, right? They don't really tell you what it means, but that's what it stands for, is British Accredited Regency. It's all domiciled in London, in that area in downtown London, city of London, okay, where there's four schools. Matter of fact, I think I go into that. Yes, I do. Anyways, a regency is the office or jurisdiction of a regent or body of regents, a government or authority by regents, and that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Inns of court. These are certain private unincorporated associations in the nature of collegiate houses located in London and invested with the exclusive privilege of calling men to the bar. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition. And 13th Amendment, this is the original 13th Amendment. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall without the consent of Congress accept or retain any present pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them, or either of them. This is the original 13th Amendment. Now, the under them or either of them, right? Well, under them is the federal government. Either of them is the state governments they're talking about. That's how they did that. And the shall incapable of holding any office of trust. That means that an office of trust requires an oath of office. And so the bar members receive a honor. They could also receive a title of nobility. There's a debate about that. They could receive a title of nobility, but it's certainly, if it's not a title of nobility, it's an honor from a foreign power, for sure. Okay, yeah, well, an esquire is a title of nobility, too. And so some of them don't use it, though. But even if they didn't get esquire, they got an honor from a foreign power. And it says it's not, none of that's included in without the consent of Congress. You see what I'm saying? So whether the Congress consents to it or not is immaterial, because it's in this first clause. Anyways, so this is the Carolina Charter of 1663, or part of it, I should say. Yielding and paying yearly to us, our heirs and successors, for the same the yearly rent of 20 marks of lawful money of England, at the Feast of Saints, yearly forever, the first payment thereof to begin and be made in the Feast of All Saints, well, it shall be the year of our Lord 1665. And also the fourth part of all gold and silver ore, within the limits aforesaid, shall from time to time happen to be found. So that's the Carolina Charter. And the Carolina Charter actually originally went from coast to coast, too, by the way. So right there, they were obligated to pay to the crown 20 marks, right? And this is, again, statute, cause of necessity for taking up arms, 1775. Statutes have passed extending courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury, in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law. And so that's what happens when you have martial law, is it supersedes and replaces common law. That people wonder why they go into court and they start arguing the Constitution or the common law, and the judge will say that doesn't apply in here and I don't want to hear another word about it. To supersede the course of common law, and instead thereof the publish nor the use and exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. 1775. What is proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety and circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military authority. That's why they passed literally millions of codes, rules, and regulations. If any man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. And that's Deuteronomy 24:7. It's all satanic. Within 2 years of the Declaration of Independence, this is George III, chapter 12, 1778, 2 years after the Declaration of Independence. So it was all about money. The War of Independence was about taxation and money. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising revenue in His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no joke, Batman, that from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, or assessment, whatever, payable in any of the colonies, provinces, or plantations in North America or the West Indies, except only such duties that may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. So 2 years. The War of Independence was all about taxation. Taxes caused the War of Independence. If they can tax you, then you are their slave. You are forced to work for them for nothing. It is becoming more and more difficult to be free. Felonies mean nothing because they have a political agenda. A tax is an impost, a tribute imposed on the subject. If you are taxed, you are a subject. An excise, a tallage, in public law, taxation signifies the system for raising money for public purposes by compelling the payment by individuals of sums of money called taxes. Some general principles of taxation have been said to be, number one, the subjects of every state. Subjects. If you are taxed, you are a subject. Ought to contribute to the support of the government as nearly as possible in proportion to their respective abilities, that is, in proportion to the revenue which they respectively enjoy under the protection of the state. Revenue. So again, that's corporate, right? Only corporations receive revenue. That's the Dictionary of English Law, Sweet and Maxwell, London, 1959. Declaration of Rights, 1776, North Carolina. So this is a Declaration of Rights, and this is preparing for the next bankruptcy. And provided further that nothing herein contained shall affect the titles or possessions of individuals holding or claiming under the laws heretofore in force, or grants heretofore made by the late King George II, or his predecessors, or the late Lords Proprietors, or any of them. So again, what they're saying is that all these debts that were previously involved are going to continue. And that's in 1776, after the Declaration of Independence. This is the treaty. This is the seeds, again, for the next bankruptcy. This is the treaty between the King and the 13 colonies of the United States of America, signed at Versailles, July 16, 1782. This is not the Treaty of Peace. Article 1. It's agreed and certified that the sums advanced by His Majesty to the Congress of the United States under the title of a loan in the years 1778, 79, 80, and 81 to the present 82 in the amount of the sum of 18 million livres, money of France, according to the following 21 receipts of the above-mentioned underwritten Minister of Congress, given in virtue of his powers, to wit. And so there's actually several pages that I got here. They're all going to be taken from the same source, so I'll mention the source this time. I'm not going to mention it on the other pages, on the other slides. The source is Treaties and Other International Acts of the United States of America, edited by Hunter Miller, Volume 2, Documents 1 through 40, 1776 to 1818, Government Printing Office, 1931. Okay, and so there's a bunch of the receipts in 1778. There's 5 of them, totaling 3 million livres. In 1779, there's 4 of them, totaling 1 million livres. In 1780, there's 5 of them, totaling 4 million livres. In 1781, there's 5 of them, totaling 4 million livres. And in 1782, there's 3 of them, totaling 6 million livres. And it's all taken from the same source. And then it continues, amounting to the whole to 18 million livres, by which receipts the said minister has promised in the name of Congress and in behalf of the 13 United States to cause to be paid and reimbursed to the royal treasury of His Majesty on the 1st of January 1788 in the house of the Grand Banker of Paris, the said sum of 18 millions, money of France, with interest at 5% per annum. So that's the seeds of the next bankruptcy. In Tarrant versus Taylor, it was stated that the dissolution of the regal government no more destroyed the rights of the church to possess and enjoy the property which belonged to it than it did the right of any other corporation or individual to his or its own property. In the latter case, the Chief Justice, in reference to the corporation of the college, observes that it is too clear to require the support of argument that all contracts and rights respecting property remain unchanged by the Revolution. And so, all these contracts, okay, again, the Revolution didn't change anything as far as all of these contracts that were involved with the government. This is the definitive Treaty of Peace of 1783, and if you go here, it says, it having pleased the divine providence to dispose the hearts of the most serene and most potent George III, the Grace, the King of England, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. So, King George III financed both sides of the War of Independence. That 18 million livres, King George financed it. And so, then think about it, it's also saying, if you read this, and they don't put this stuff in there unless there's something important, okay? But it says, Defender of the Faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. So again, he was doing it on behalf of the Roman cult, is what was happening. The Roman cult told him to do it. And Article 4, it's agreed that the creditors on either side shall meet with no lawful impediment to the recovery of full value in sterling money of old bona fide debts heretofore contracted. So, again, all of the debts are continued. King George the Tyrant was King of France and England, financed both sides of the War of Independence. The United States owed France 18 million livres from the war. He was the Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. Queen Elizabeth is now Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the United States of America. There's 2 ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword, the other is by debt. On Christmas Eve, 24th of December, 1913, in the middle of the night, Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act setting up the scenario for the next bankruptcy. It took less than 20 years for the Federal Reserve banksters, to orchestrate the bankruptcy. So that's what we're seeing right now, is again, it's all about debt. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. And that's quote by Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley in the Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. The Catholic Church will rule the world. Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. Remember, martial law is the law of emergency and necessity. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. And this is the U.S. Senate Report number 93-549, dated November 19, 1973. And this is Congressional Record, March 17, 1993, volume 33. And it says, "It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933. Same day, March 9, 1933. 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, dated 73rd Congress in session June 5, 1933. Joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only." When acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. Courts administering or enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely act as an extension, as an agent for the involved agency, as a bought and paid for clerk. It's the accepted rule, not only state governments, but of the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes, as a bought and paid for clerk. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, and otherwise act as mere clerks of the involved agency. So anytime you're in court and it's administrative, which is 99% of the time, the judge is not the guy you need to go after, is the prosecutor. That's who you need to go after. You need to file bar complaints against him. You need to go after him. He's the enemy. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. And so, again, if a judge is not acting, if he is, and you can get evidence. You can go down to the clerk and tell them you want a copy of everything that was filed into that case. And they will give you evidence. You can get evidence to show that that judge is not operating as a judge, that he's operating as a military commissioner. Like, for example, in the DC Code, that's one of the things I bring up, that they, in the DC Code, military commissioners get a royalty for an order of commitment, okay? Well, they issued an order of commitment against me in Texas, and I went and I filed a criminal complaint against that judge because he was impersonating a judge. He was actually a military commissioner, and he's collecting his royalty for as a military commissioner to get his with his order of commitment, okay? And so that was perjury of oath on his part, and so I filed a criminal complaint against him. And that was Bedford too. Where there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the day from the days of Marshalsea. Now that's quoting 10 Coke 68. That's Coke in the 1500s, and that's also quoting a federal court case. So that's federal Bradley versus Fisher is a U.S. Supreme Court case, and that's taken from Manning versus Ketchum, which is just a federal court case. A judge wears a military uniform. A judge sits there and plays stupid. If you fail to follow some obscure rule or procedure, they sell you into slavery. And so you got to understand what's going on and the fact that he's in bad behavior, okay? Because judge only holds office during good behavior. That's in Article 3 of the Constitution. Everything they do is a fraud and a nullity. Judge works for the state, prosecutor works for the state, police or witness works for the state. The vast majority of disputes that the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, and the only witness, also the police, all represent the same party. And since no corpus delicti, mens rea, or acts reus can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be heard according to its own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. This is the current so-called 13th Amendment. Remember we were talking about this earlier? Daniel, Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist. So, again, they sell you into slavery. He, the prisoner, has, as a consequence of his crime, not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights, except those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is, for the time being, a slave of the state. And that is satanic. That is selling people into slavery. They should, at common law, they'd get their necks stretched. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren, the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. And, you know, we, the people, are not putting evil away from among us. And so we are being, you know, I mean, part of what's going on nowadays is, you know, where God is, we're going to have to start standing up and saying enough of this. Article 4, Clause 2, the Constitution and laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the constitutional laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So it doesn't matter what state statutes, it doesn't matter anything, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, the federal Constitution. Whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any inhabitant of any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, that mask, when they go and refuse you service or tell you that you got to put that mask on, that's violating your rights under the color of law. And that governor has issued an edict under martial law. That is color of law. And so we need to understand that. And that's what they're doing. As a matter of fact, I always go in without a mask, and I'm usually, most of these people in restaurants are you know, they're completely clueless. So I usually treat it as a teaching opportunity, and I tell them, you know, it's a felony, and they go, huh? And I say, well, I said the governor's edicts under martial law are color of law. It's something that looks like law, acts like law, but isn't. And I said the same thing with the county commissioners. And I said, it's a felony under Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, to violate my rights under the color of law. And so then they say, well, we put the sign up. They did this today, actually. We put the sign up, and so there's nothing forcing you to come in here. And I said, so then if somebody tells you that to murder somebody, you're going to go ahead and do that too? I mean, that's a felony. So anyways, I brought the mask out about that, and I said, I'll put it on. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I think that you need to consider this. And certainly, if some bureaucrat gets on your case about people without masks, you can tell them they told you it's a felony, and that'll get you off the hook. And that will, because they know it's a felony. And once you bring it to their attention, remember, we talked about it earlier, they have to have good faith. When you take away their good faith, then they've got a problem. If two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person, well, gee, that sounds like what goes on. The governor issues an edict, and his hired thug here is threatening you and intimidating you in the free exercise of your rights to come into a restaurant and have something to eat. You know, that's a felony, another one. So there's two felonies going on. This is, again, a good faith reliance. This is the on a court warrant or order or a grand jury subpoena, a legislative authorization or statutory authorization, including a request from a governmental entity, a request of an investigative or law enforcement officer, a good faith determination. That's Section 2511 of this title, permitted the conduct complained of, is a complete defense in any civil or criminal action brought under this chapter or any under the law. And so, again, if they can claim good faith somehow, that's why, in my opinion, why Barr has been, taking his time building a case against, these deep state types, because he's got to build a case. He's got to be able to show that they didn't have good faith. Now, if they're Barr members, then they're required to know the law. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities and is very particular and very horrible. Their restoration is indeed a step towards darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits. There was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell. It is the Society of Loyola. And that's John Adams, 2nd President of the United States. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley in the Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. And oh, look at that. This is Congress. And this is 24th of September, 2015, when the pimp, or the Pope, I meant, not the pimp, went to speak before his servants, right? And if you want to know what this text means, it's kind of hard to read here. So I went and there's the Jesuit right there. The first one says, Roman Achaea military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. And that's this one right here, pointing at this military staff right here. Okay? So that is a Roman Achaea military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. And then a devout Roman Catholic honorary degree from Jesuit Scranton University is the second one. That's what this says, and that's pointing at Biden, the current candidate for president. Oh, we want him in there, don't we? The next one is Roman bundle rods bound to a weapon, symbolizing subservient under the rule of a single man. And that's this text right here, pointing at these fascists right here. Devout Roman Catholic, trained by the Jesuits, installed the first Jesuit chaplain to the house. And that's pointing at Boehner or Boner or whatever his name is. That's this text right here, pointing at him. So this was 24th of September 2015. Congress is owned and operated by the Roman cult. On behalf of the Roman cult, Congress has been imposing a military dictatorship on everybody in America. And here is the pimp with Obama, and they're laughing and chuckling, because they know that Obama's going to go along with whatever he wants to go with, so they're just all happy. And here, Trump is happy, but he's not too happy because he knows what's coming. Justice is coming. And because it brings into an action and enforces this great and glorious principle that the people are the sovereign of this country, and consequently that fellow citizens and joint sovereigns cannot be degraded by appearing with each other in their own courts to have their controversies determined. That's U.S. Supreme Court, Chisholm versus Georgia, 1794. This is one of the things that I tell those, and I put it in my documents here, when I tell them, you work for me. And this is one of the things I have. And then the right of blood and kindred cannot be destroyed by any civil law. And that's a maxim of law. And that's another thing I put in there. And the power which is derived cannot be greater than that from which it is derived. My ancestors wrote the Constitution, and so there you work for me. Your oath of office is to me. And that's what matter of fact, I didn't even tell those judges in the Second Circuit all of this. I give them the statement of original status. That's all I gave them. And I told them, you work for me. And they all recused themselves. Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law. But in our system, while sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all government exists and acts. You work for me. Your oath of office is to me. That's U.S. Supreme Court, Yickwo versus Hopkins. A sovereign is exempt from suit not because of any formal conception or obsolete theory, but on the logical and practical ground that there can be no legal right as against the authority that makes the law on which the right depends. I mean, that is so powerful. and they just disappear, you know. This is the stuff that I put in there now. And that's Kawanikoa versus Polly Blank, U.S. Supreme Court, 1907. And this is Bedford. I went and had all that stuff in the Bedford Notice of Void Judgment that's right over here. I got two of them if you guys want to look through them and take a look at them. It's in there among some other stuff. But this is what they sent me. I sent those things. What happened is Bedford was under this lockdown because of this coronavirus hoax. And so I couldn't even go to the court. I like to go into the court and get their file stamps on it, right? And I'll take in an original and 2 copies. I'll take one for the court, a copy for the prosecutor, and one for me. And I'll take them to the court and I'll say, here's the originals for the court. There's this one's for the prosecutor and this one's for me. And please file stamp them and give this other one to me. They'll give the one to the prosecutor. And so, but I wasn't able to do that because it was all locked down. So I had to mail it to them. And that's why that one doesn't have a file stamp on it, because I mailed it to them with a self-addressed postage-paid envelope saying, please return 1 copy to me. And they never did. I was really upset. I'm still upset because I want that file stamp copy because it makes great evidence for bar complaints and judicial complaints. But they didn't send it back. What they sent is this letter. After further review by the prosecutor, the case below has been dismissed. That's the enemy. That's who is going after it, okay? The judge, you know, he's nothing, okay? He's bought and paid for by the prosecutor. It's the prosecutor that's doing it. That's why you file the bar complaints and you go after the prosecutor. But so they dismissed the case. And that's it. That's the end of the presentation. If anybody has any questions, I mean, I can go through the text on these things. Why don't we take a break, first of all, because it's getting kind of, we've gone through a lot of stuff, and we can take a break, and then I'll go through, and I can show the PDF files, and I'll show you, you know, which ones I did, and what I did in the Bedford case or other cases. And what I do also is sometimes, sometimes this has worked. When I bring up these issues, it's worked every time. But